Hello, a very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. And to tune into the sunrise. Now I'll be keeping you company all the way from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And it is in fact the second hour of my show, which means that I'll be here to talk to you about so many more interesting things. I will keep you company all the way until 9 as well with a lot of interesting content. So make sure you stay tuned. Now, while you're at it, make sure to follow us on our socials as well, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because that way you can actually be a part of, you can actually keep yourself updated on everything that's happening, but also you can make sure that you're a part of this conversation. Now, all you have to do is just text me on 078 to be a part of this conversation. And, so that I can always hear your input. I can hear your thoughts and your perspectives about everything that we're talking about. And while you're at it, also make sure you check out the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store to download our app on both your iOS device and also your Android device as well. So make sure you do that because that way it will definitely definitely make you a part of this conversation at any time you want to be a part of this conversation, because like I said, we're 24/7 hours, or 24 hours a day. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, definitely make sure you subscribe to our channels as well, and that way you will know what we're talking about, because right here on Relax Radio we talk about everything from science to health to technology to finance. Whatever it is that you name, we will be talking about all of it. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But right now, let's actually get into this conversation about how the UK is actually set to ban zoos and safari parks from keeping elephants. Now, keeping elephants in UK zoos and safari parks is reportedly set to become a thing of the past, because new legislation will actually prohibit the importation of new elephants, with existing UK based populations allowed to die out naturally. Now, obviously, this is a huge win for a lot of the animal rights activists out there, because they have been campaigning for the rights of elephants and other animals as well. But why we're focusing on elephants right now is simply because elephants are huge animals, right? And obviously, even though they have these safari parks and whatnot, the space that is there for them to live in it is actually quite small, and because of that it actually restricts a lot of their ability to travel around and ability to do whatever they do. And because of that, because it actually restricts them a lot, it's very, very detrimental for them. So that's why they're actually finally taking this decision to make sure that elephants are much more safer, and that they won't be importing elephants, and that the already existing elephants will actually just be allowed to naturally die out. Now, the government is due to receive the results of a report on the welfare of elephants in captivity soon, and a senior source actually told that the report argues against keeping the creatures in zoos and safari parks. And what they're trying to focus on, both the legislation and the report, is the fact that there is a lot of torture, there's a lot of abuse and harassment that these animals go through, just to perform these circus tricks and just to be there for our enjoyment. And the sad thing is, this has been happening for a long time. Right here in the UK, it has actually been happening for 7 centuries. So that's 700 years of animal torture, cruelty and abuse. And because they're animals and they can't really do anything about the fact that they actually go through a lot of suffering, they go through a lot of pain and a lot of torture while they're here. And the thing is, you'd think that when all these animals are there in zoos and whatnot, you think, especially with how much we have evolved, how much we've developed as a nation, or how much, or even how much we've developed as a civilization, that we'd actually have better conditions for all these animals, right? We'd actually have you know much more space for these animals, that they wouldn't feel so restricted, they wouldn't feel so you know feel very suffocated in that little amount of space that they have. But the truth is, actually, that's not how it is. These animals are actually forced to go through a lot of abuse, a lot of cruelty and a lot of torture. And because of those things, it's very, very hard for these animals to live out how much they normally do. And because of the fact that they're constantly so depressed and so unhappy because of all the torture and abuse that they go through, they actually die much, much earlier than they're actually supposed to. So obviously, because of all these negative causes, these negative detriments that are, or the detrimental effects that it has on animals, especially elephants. That is why the UK is actually going to set this ban on zoos and safari parks from keeping elephants. Now, basically, he also said that once the current load of elephants actually die out, that they aren't going to replace it. Basically, they're just going to say no to it. They're not going to have any more elephants coming into the country, and they're going to make sure that the elephants that are there currently will be well protected. We'll not have to continue being in zoos, and will basically have much more freedom and less cruelty and torture that they had, than what they had when they were in those zoos and safari parks. So so like I said earlier, apparently it's very impossible to keep them in conditions where they're happy because the space is way too small. Like I said, when you're a huge animal, you need a lot of space, and especially if you're an animal like an elephant. And come on, we all agree to the fact that elephants are majestic. Elephants are just this wild, majestic beasts that are out there. But the fact that we're still taming them, and we're still trying to sort of abuse them and use them for our enjoyment, just goes a lot to show how we as humans don't really care about all the other species of animals that exist in this planet, because this is not the first time you've heard of different species of animals going extinct, or even the animals being endangered. And like I said some time back, I think it's just human nature to destroy animals. I think, like, not even animals, but I think things in general, that's just how human nature is. We just want to destroy these things that are there, just to sort of assert dominance, just to show them who's like king, because that's how it is. But the truth is, a lot of these animals just need to be left by themselves, because we need to understand that some of the places we live right now, some of the places we call our habitats or our homes, were in fact the habitats of animals. So um we've also heard of this human elephant conflicts, especially in different parts of the world, like Africa, or even in some Asian countries like Sri Lanka. Now we've heard of that, and then you sort of begin to understand why these human elephant conflicts actually exist, because these we are the ones that have actually taken the land of these animals. This is the places they used to roam. This is where they used to live and basically find food for themselves and basically walk. So obviously there is going to be a lot of conflict, given the fact that we have taken what that basically we've taken their land, to put it that way, because this is where they used to live. So we've actually destroyed their homes, and we've taken that land, and it's nothing to actually be surprised about when these elephants start attacking and whatnot, right? But the thing is, that's a whole other issue altogether, which we'll probably discuss sometime later, maybe not, but that's a whole other issue altogether. But like I said, it's impossible to keep elephants in conditions where they're happy, because the space is too small. And in the UK, the biggest elephant enclosures are so minute, they grub up the environment so quickly too, because they have an incredibly important role in that. But if they're in such a small area, they destroy everything. So again, like I said, when like, forget about animals, right? Just think of humans for a minute. When you feel like you're restricted, when you feel like you're caged, like you have no freedom, then that's when you start fighting, right? That's when you sort of start saying like, no, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm not going to let you restrict me. So it's the same with these elephants as well. When they have a lot of space, they can actually grow, and they will take all of that space, because they're huge animals and they're supposed to take all of that space. But when we keep them in this small restricted space, the small confined spaces, actually, it makes them very angry and frustrated. Because look, wouldn't you, I mean, we're all feeling very frustrated right now because of the pandemic, right? Because we can't travel, like, we're easily irritated, we're easily annoyed, simply because of the fact that we can't go out as much as we used to. So imagine all these animals in zoos rather. Imagine all these animals who have been caged for the longest time ever. Imagine how they must have been feeling all this time. The fact that we can't go out for a few months makes us annoyed, makes us very, very angry, is probably so much more worse for all these animals who are in these zoos, who are in these safari parks, that can't go out at all, right? And especially as animals, when you're like born to roam, when you're born to explore the wild, when that is what the life of an animal is, when you're restricted and caged, then chances are they are going to get angry, they are going to get irritated, and they're going to get very, very hard to tame as well. So, like I said earlier, there is a very important role when it comes to how much of space that is given for these elephants. Now, it's very, very likely that we're going to say that, you can't make elephants happy in zoos. We should instead actually focus on elephant conservation in areas that have elephants. So instead of trying to make them happy, instead of trying to keep them in this restricted, confined space, what we can actually do is focus on elephant conservation in places that elephants are there, because that way we can make sure that even those final few elephants that are left will actually have a much, much better life than the life that they had when they were inside zoos and safari parks, where they weren't really allowed to do what they wanted to. Now, I know safari parks don't really have any, not that they don't have any, but it's just they relatively have more freedom. At least that's what it looks like. But again, we're not too sure, we don't really know what is happening, so obviously that is something, again, that is something that research needs to be done on as well. So the policy is actually a part of this, of wider zoo reforms, which will be announced later this year as a part of the Kept Animals Bill. Now, they will also focus on other aspects of animal welfare too, which is very important given the fact that the UK actually recently recognized animals as sentient beings. So because of that, it's very, very important that that we address these issues through these bills, and we try to, I mean, it's something positive. It's definitely a huge win for all those animal rights activists out there, people who are very interested in animal welfare as well, to actually make sure that finally we're considering the fact that these animals need to be protected. We're considering the fact that these animals need to be conserved as well. Now, right now, we'll head into a small break, but don't worry, because we'll be back in a while to talk about everything related to animal rights, animal welfare, and the animal bills, and how these are actually helping a lot of the animal rights activists out there.
There's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing. Right? And the company may still have value. It may still be doing quite a good thing.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of my, that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. If you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's, how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you, if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there.
I mean, I've been doing this for quite some time. I mean, hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of my, that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah. Welcome back to the chat. Now, earlier we were talking about how the UK is actually going to ban zoos and safari parks from keeping elephants simply because of the fact that elephants are highly intelligent creatures, and the fact that finally keeping all these animals captive is actually finally getting to them and affecting them a lot, right? So that's what we were talking about, and we were talking about how things have changed a lot, and how these elephants get very angry, how it affects their mental health and their physical well-being as well when they're kept confined. So obviously that's what we were talking about. Now I'm very, very excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. Welcome back to my show, The Sunrise. Now this is the second hour of the show, and I will be here all the way until 9 a.m. because there's so much more that we have to talk about as well. So make sure you stay tuned. But also, while you're at it, make sure you follow us on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because that way you can always stay up to date on everything that is happening in the UK, but also all around the world as well. So obviously, make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you stay tuned to our socials as well. Now, while you're at it, make sure to go check out the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store for our apps that you can download on your iOS device and your Android device. And that will definitely help you be a part of this conversation anytime you want. Okay, so make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get into this conversation of all these animals, and what it actually means for all these animals when they're kept captive and how it affects them as well. So many animal rights groups have actually been calling for a ban on elephants being kept in zoos, as they're highly intelligent migratory creatures, and being kept in confined spaces can actually damage their mental health and physical well-being. Now, like I said earlier, that is not too much of a stretch to say, because we understand that when it comes to all these animals who are in zoos, when it comes to all these animals who are in safari parks as well, you're actually keeping them very confined. You're keeping them, or you're limiting the amount that they can travel, and basically you're taming these wild elephants, right? Now, elephants, and this is not just a saying. Research has actually found that elephants are very intelligent creatures. They actually remember a lot, and they remember very well as well. So obviously, the fact that we're sort of torturing these elephants, we're preventing them from moving about and migrating and whatnot, is actually affecting their mental health and their physical well-being. And studies have actually shown that elephants live 3 times longer in the wild than when they live in confined spaces. So Mark Jones of the charity Born Free actually said that there are many species that don't belong in zoos, and elephants are very much one of those species. And it definitely needs to be phased out, that the needs of these very wide roaming, very complex social animals cannot be met in a captive environment. So like I said, but when you're watching these documentaries or movies, whatever it is about elephants, you tend to think that elephants are just about eating, reproducing, and moving around, right? Because that's what you'd normally assume. That's what you normally assume of animals. You think that all animals are all just about eating, sort of reproducing, and just traveling, and that's what you think that animals do. But the truth is, that's not all they do. Animals, even though they don't have like a brain like we do, they actually are very very intelligent. They have their own mind, and they think things their own way. But obviously, the fact is that humans are very selfish. It's always about our pleasure. It's always about what we like to do. It's always about what we enjoy, that we never actually consider about what other animals feel about it. And forget about animals, sometimes even when it comes to people, people can be very very selfish, right? You would always think about yourself. You would always think about what you want and what you enjoy, and not really think about the other person, simply because of the fact that you don't care about the other person, or the other person just doesn't matter. The other person just isn't important enough. So that is something that is there for these animals as well. Imagine, I mean, if you're going to ignore the needs of like another human being, then what's to say that you won't ignore the needs of animals as well? And you know what, I don't even have to say it, because we've seen that happen a lot. We've actually seen it happen everywhere in the world, and it's still happening. So obviously, like Mark Jones says, these animals are very complex social animals, and that their needs can't actually be met inside this captive environment. Now, they're also plagued in captivity by illnesses. They have illnesses including crippling arthritis, and they live on an average for just 17 years, according to the RSPCA. Now, this compares with actually more than 50 years in the wild, which is basically almost 3 times the amount they normally live, especially if they're being held captive. So that just goes to show how the lifespan changes. They have different illnesses and sicknesses, and their mental and physical well-being is also affected when they're held captive. And this legislation that is currently being introduced, or currently in the process of being introduced, will actually bring an end to more than 7 centuries of elephants being kept in captivity in Britain. Now, the first elephant actually arrived in 1255, and it was a present from Henry III to, or rather, it was a present to Henry III from Louis IX of France. And when he actually sent this gift, it was actually described as a beast most strange and wonderful to the English people. So that is what the elephant was described as when it was first sent as a gift to the British people. And because we have actually been involved in keeping elephants captive, in making sure they live in very restrictive environments for the past 700 years, that means that these animals could have probably lived longer. These animals probably wouldn't be on the verge of being an endangered animal, simply if we just took more care, if we actually just didn't restrict them as much as we're restricting them right now. Because the what we need to understand is, like I said, it doesn't take, this is not rocket science, right? The fact that animals get more depressed, the fact that they tend to die faster than they normally would if they're held captive, is nothing new. Because forget about animals, if you don't care about animals, just think of yourself. If you're a human being and you're held captive, then chances are you're not going to be happy as well, right? Because no one wants to be restricted like that. No one wants to be told what limits that what limits and boundaries they have. Like, nobody likes to do that. So obviously, imagine this. But it's worse for animals, because they can't even open their mouth and voice their opinions. At least for us, we can say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. Doesn't always mean you get out of that situation, but at least you still have the ability to sort of open your mouth and say, look, I don't want to go through this. It's depressing for me. It's affecting my mental and my physical well-being. But the truth is, for some of these elephants, forget about elephants, animals in general, they don't really have the ability to do that. They can't voice out their opinions like that, and they can't say things the way we can. So obviously, there is a lot of suffering, there is a lot of pain and torture that they go through as well. And it's actually quite sad, because a lot of us tend to think, oh, the circus trick done by that elephant was very cool, it was very fun to watch, and we pay so much of money. And we don't pay so much of money, but the fact that so many people come and pay money just to watch an elephant act really unnatural, just goes to show that it just goes to show how much we destroy nature. It just goes to show how much we don't appreciate any of the things of nature that we have been given. So now, so getting back into the topic about animal welfare and animal rights. Now, the members of the parliament have been campaigning on this issue for some time, actually, particularly through the influential Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. Now, Lauren Platt, who's chairman of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation, said that keeping elephants in zoos was cruel, and also it isn't appropriate to keep elephants in zoos. And this is because earlier, like I said, they need large spaces to roam, and also because they have very close knit family groups as well. So when you sort of isolate elephants, when you keep them away from their families, that actually affects it actually affects them, right? Now, like I said, we subject them through a lot of torture, to a lot of abuse, and basically we isolate them a lot as well, right? Especially if you're importing these elephants, for your zoos, or even for these safari parks. If you're getting elephants from other countries, you're basically isolating them from the rest of their family. And elephants actually being creatures who are very, very they have a very community based sort of you know um behavioral patterns, right? You've never seen like a single elephant, right? Unless, or of course, you were taking pictures of them while you were at a safari, or in the zoo or something. But most of the time, when you're watching these documentaries and all about elephants, you've always seen them in these tightly knit groups. It's always a group of, it's a herd of elephants. It's not just one or two elephants, right? So obviously, because elephants are very social creatures who have a lot of a lot of there's a lot of togetherness of between them and their families. It's actually very, very hard for them to be separated from the families. But obviously, that is what we're doing when we have these elephants in zoos, and when we have these elephants in safari parks, and it's very, very unhealthy for them. And that is also another result as to why they have so many sicknesses, why they're so depressed, and why they feel so sad. Like, I don't know, if you've been to the zoo and if you've seen all these elephants, you can see it in their eyes. You can see how much they're suffering, and you can see how much pain they're in. And it's actually quite sad, because these are some of the most intelligent animals on earth. These are some of the most smartest animals. And I just remember there was this meme that I once saw where they said, how we think puppies are cute, elephants apparently think humans are cute. So despite the fact that we still abuse and torture them, they still think we're cute. And that is just really heartbreaking and sad, because these animals were, they're just a part of nature. They're who they are, and they exist, and they obviously protect our ecosystems. They balance our ecosystems as well. But the fact that they're an endangered species, the fact that they're so, they're tortured, they have to undergo a lot of cruel treatment because of the fact that people just find elephants fascinating, is very, very sad. So obviously it's a big win for all these animal rights activists, but also for animals as well, to finally be given the chance at freedom, right? To finally understand the fact that these animals, they themselves have feelings, that they obviously feel a lot of things. It's a huge step in terms of progress and development for all these animals. So that's something to definitely look forward to. So make sure you stay tuned, because I will actually be back to talk to you about how animals are used in circuses and whatnot, and also some of the huge issues of public outrage that have been there, especially when it came to these elephants. So make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about all of this.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is, I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true that the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day?
Uh, I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now?
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset, And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter. Yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it," and that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. They'd have to me. Why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid, I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. Now I'm super excited to be here, and you're in the second hour of my show because we have a lot of interesting content to talk about today, actually. So we were just talking about animal welfare, where we're talking about elephants and how the UK is actually finally taking some steps to ban elephants in zoos and safari parks to make sure that elephants are safe and protected, especially because of how much of trauma and how much of torture that they have been going through. So obviously that is what we're talking about. Now it is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. But I also have to remind you that before we get into the conversation, that you should probably go check out our Instagram page, our Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok pages as well, because you're going to find a lot of interesting content out there. Okay. So make sure you do that because it is definitely going to help you so much. It will help you keep updated on everything that's happening in the United Kingdom and all over the world as well, because we talk about technology, we talk about science, we talk about everything related to the entire world, even space. So make sure you follow them to always stay tuned, to always be ahead of the game and know everything that is going on, because when you're here at Relax Radio, we love to keep you informed. We love to make sure that you know about everything that's happening around the world. And also, another way you can also be a part of this conversation is actually by downloading our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. You can listen. You can listen to us from any of your devices, and that way you can actually be a part of this conversation. And you can text me on 07852473473 as well to be a part of this conversation. So let's get back into the conversation. Actually, we'll talk about how the UK is finally taking steps to save its elephants, and what kind of steps they are taking as well, and whether these steps they're taking is only relevant to elephants, but or whether it's relevant to a lot of other animals out there as well. So public outrage was actually triggered in 2011, which I'm not too sure if you remember, but when welfare campaigners actually revealed footage of Anne, who was the last circus elephant in Britain, and she was changed. She was actually chained in Northamptonshire, in a Northamptonshire barn with shackles around her legs. And Daily Mail readers actually raised £410,000 in donations to help pay for this retirement, for her retirement rather, in a state of the art enclosure at Longleat, where she remains. So obviously, this isn't the first instance this has happened as well, and this will definitely not be the last until these reforms are introduced. Now, this is why it's very important to talk about these issues. That's why it's very, very important to make sure that we protect the elephants that we have. Now, there are actually 51 elephants in 11 zoos across the UK, including at Woburn, Whipsnade, Colchester, and Chester. Now, there are 51 elephants, like I said, in these areas, and they're all in zoos as well. So in January 2020, they actually made it illegal for circuses to keep elephants. So ever since then, these elephants have been in zoos, or being put in safari parks and whatnot. So it's these are some of the steps that they have been taking. And like I said, a lot, we've seen a lot of footage, we've seen a lot of videos of um elephants being tortured, where they've been mistreated, and we've also seen a lot of the pain that they go through as well. Now, like I said, in the wild, elephants actually live in large herds and are migratory animals with highly complex social lives. And some even travel hundreds of miles each year. But obviously, you can't really do that if you're in this enclosed space. If you're being restricted, if you're being confined, then you can't really travel, and you can't really make that change as well. So, the Animal Welfare or the Kept Animals Bill will actually bolster animal welfare in five key categories, as per the government website. Now, the five key categories obviously they'll be focusing on elephants, but in addition to those elephants, they'll also be focusing on five different other areas as well. Now, the first one is puppy smuggling, which will be banned. Obviously, that happens a lot right here in the United Kingdom. And secondly is live animal exporting, which is typically done before fattening animals up for a slaughter, right? And that will be banned as well. If you actually look into some of these practices that are there for animals, especially when it comes to the animals we consume, there is a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of stress that these animals go through, right? And this is also why I keep telling my friends it's so much better to be vegan or vegetarian, because if you look at the way these animals suffer, it's actually really, really sad. Like, it's just, you see all these videos and then you're like, I don't want to eat anymore, because no one deserves to suffer that way, right? Regardless of the fact that they're animals, no one still deserves to suffer like that. So, if you're trying to be vegan, if you want to go vegan, then now is the best opportunity. And also, if you're trying to convince yourself to actually be vegan, then one of the best ways in which you can do that is actually do some research on the way animals are treated. Do some research on the way animals are treated before they're killed for our consumption. Okay, those things will actually really help you be aware of everything that is happening, and also be make you aware of how sometimes when they're so stressed out, when they're so traumatized, they release certain toxins that might be actually very harmful for the people who consume meat. Now, another part, or the third perspective they'll be focusing on is actually where keeping primates as pet will be prohibited. Right now, primates can apparently still be kept in zoos, but if you're keeping them as pets in your house, well, that is prohibited as well. Then there's something else called livestock worrying, which essentially allows police to protect animals being kept as livestock from dangerous dogs. Okay, and the last perspective, or the last aspect rather, is zoos. Now, the Zoo Licensing Act will be updated to improve regulations and conservation efforts at zoos. And the Kept Animals Bill will actually bring in some of the world's highest and strongest protection for pets, livestock, and kept wild animals. This was actually said by the Environment Secretary George Eustace in a statement that he gave, because right now in the UK we're trying to make sure sure that animals are conserved. We're trying to make sure they're protected, and they have some of the strongest protection, because we've seen how much they've suffered. We've seen how much trauma they go through, and we've also seen how very, very unhealthy it is for all of these animals to be in these sort of conditions. So obviously that is what we're doing right now. That is why the government is taking these steps to make sure that these animals are protected, and that we don't have to make sure they and we make sure that they aren't continuously suffering, that they aren't continuously tortured and being put through these very, very traumatizing situations. Now, additionally, the UK government also said that it plans to announce more laws to protect animals as a part of its action plan for animal welfare, which will happen later this year. Now, these laws will have to do with microchipping, pet theft, welfare for farmed animals, and wildlife crime. So hopefully this law will cover a lot of these areas in which animals have been tortured, a lot of these areas in which animals are abused a lot as well, and that is something that is very detrimental, not just for humans but also for our ecosystem as well, because we need these animals to survive. We need to make sure that the animals who are there are protected as well. And obviously it's not a lot of people that care about animals. Look, like, it's all fun and games to call a dog cute, to actually love a dog or whatnot, but the thing is, dogs aren't the only animals in the world, right? There are so many other animals, so many animals who are at the risk of extinction, who are endangered species and are facing extinction as well. So it's very, very important that the government is finally taking these steps to actually make sure and to address the fact that that these animals are being protected. Now, let's also talk about zoos and how we always get this impression that animals who are in zoos are actually protected and much safer. Now, even though many zoos give customers the impression that its animals are taken care of, there's no denying that living in captivity has a negative impact on most species, right? Now, this was actually explained by Freedom for Animals, which is basically this organization, and they said that animals at zoos are actually forced to live in tight quarters that are far smaller and have different conditions than their natural habitats. And sometimes they're even forced to go through training to perform tricks, and they can suffer from zoochosis, which can cause depressions, frustration, self-mutilation, excessive grooming, and more. So these are a lot of, this is just a few of the health effects that they go through. Now, there's so much more, but make sure you stay tuned, because we will get into that conversation about all of these impacts that these animals have to go through. We will get into that conversation very soon after this break, but make sure you stay tuned.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true that the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of their company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what their company does or how valuable their company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value, it may still be doing quite a good thing.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, you're tuned into the sunrise where I'll be keeping you company all the way from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And we were just talking about, you know, zoos and safari parks being banned from holding elephants. Now, if you're just tuning in, that is what the conversation was about. We were talking about the various conditions in which zoo animals live in, especially elephants. And we were talking about how the confined spaces and how the restrictive spaces are actually causing a lot of mental health and even physical health problems to all these elephants in zoos. Right now, earlier we were just talking about zoocosis, which can cause depression, frustration, self-mutilation, excessive grooming, and more for all these animals who are held captive and all these animals who are restricted in zoos. So that's what we were talking about. And let's get back into that conversation because we need to understand that these conditions often cause zoo animals to die prematurely, right? And it's not just elephants, it's almost, a lot of these animals who are in zoos in general who a lot of these animals who are in zoos in general are actually caused to die prematurely simply because of simply because of how much of stress and trauma that they go through, and also the fact that this captivity, this restriction actually ends up in them having a lot of health issues, and then these zoos and whatnot not really treating any of these health issues because obviously it's costly as well. Just goes to show that something needs to be done when it comes to being when it comes to holding animals in zoos as well, right? I personally think that zoos should be banned because if anything, you want to look at some animals, well, guess what? You can just type them on the internet and look at these animals. You don't have to hold these animals in zoos. And we live in a time and age where everything is so advanced. Even if you wanted to get that 3D experience, if you wanted to feel what it was like to see these animals, then you can easily do that in places where they have experiences like that. So, like I said, I personally believe that zoos should be banned because it's not only unhealthy and dangerous for animals, but it's also dangerous and unhealthy for humans as well. So obviously, in my opinion, I think zoos should be banned. But that might not be your opinion. But if you do have any opinions like that, make sure you text me on 07852473473 because I would love to know your opinion on it. Now, in fact, while elephants typically live to between 60 to 70 years of age, but while they're captive, these elephants usually die before they even turn 40. And this was according to this nonprofit called Last Chance for Animals. It's actually really sad how much we're putting these animals in danger. And, ironically, though, we put these animals in danger, we make them extinct, we make them endangered, and then we try to protect them. Like, if we probably didn't do some of those things we did back then, we probably wouldn't be facing this whole question. We wouldn't be facing this whole um dilemma of endangered animals and them going nearly extinct, right? Now, the PETA actually notes that wild elephants often walk up to 30 miles a day looking for food in zoos, but in zoos, they're confined to small enclosures that don't even allow walking for more than a few yards at a time. So I'm just going to tell you all these, effects that they go through, how much they're tortured, and how much it doesn't help them at all, because it's very very important that we ourselves understand that even when it comes to looking at these animals, when we go to zoos, when we're when we're paying to watch these animals suffer, we're contributing to their suffering, we're contributing to the pain that they feel. So obviously it's very important that we all understand what sort of impacts animals face through this conversation. And the bill to ban elephants being held in captivity across the UK is obviously something positive. It's for elephants, and it's not just for elephants but also because of the other steps that are the other measures that are there in the kept animals bill. It's also a positive thing for a lot of the other animals that are here right in the United Kingdom. And hopefully, our country will ban other animals from the same fate. Now, back in May, the government actually decided to formally recognize animals as sentient beings in the UK law for the first time. So, obviously, that is a lot of progress as well. And that obviously means that when it comes to recognizing these animals as sentient beings, when it comes to recognizing that these animals actually do have feelings, that they, feel things the same way we do, it means that now people will be more aware. Hopefully people will be more aware, and hopefully they will start understanding the negative, or rather the detrimental impacts that this that the industry of zoos and even safari parks, how that has a very negative industry, or a very negative impact on all these animals that are being held captive in zoos. So that is what the conversation was about. Now, stay tuned because I'll actually be back again in a few more minutes to talk about chronic pain, something that a lot of people in the United Kingdom face, and something that needs to be discussed as well because it has been exacerbated by long COVID. So make sure you stay tuned because I'll be back in a few minutes to continue that conversation.